Welcome back. I'm the Chronology Nut.
And I'm Judgment 915 from Sailor Moon Abridged.
We just finished discussing the story of Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and now we're going to discuss the artistry. For those of you who don't regularly read my blog, artistry is a catch-all term that I use to refer to things like graphics, music, sound effects, voice acting, and level design. So we're going to try to run through all that as quickly and efficiently as we can. Judgment, what do you think about the artistry in this game? Let's talk about the graphics first.
Well, the game looks absolutely gorgeous, especially when you take into the context that it's a 2D side-scrolling platformer. I mean, the amount of depth that every particular screen has in it, from the backgrounds and foregrounds to the way your character interacts with every, step and jump, it's just absolutely gorgeous to look at.
It's beautifully animated, I think we can agree on that.
Oh, yes.
And the character sprites are really something special as well. You've got Richter, Maria, Alucard, Death, and Dracula, who all have a lot of different animations, and they all look extremely fluid. If you compare this to other Castlevania games, even something like Rondo of Blood, far and away, much different kind of game. And Castlevania games always have good animations, always have good backgrounds, but this really set a new height, a new precedent for the series to follow.
Oh, yeah.
So, the animations especially are smooth, we talked about that. We talked a little about the graphics, the backgrounds. Let's move on and talk about the music. Now, we know that Castlevania has something of a history of really, really great music. The series has something like 30 composers. You get an average of about 2 per game, and every composer brings something new to the table. I believe that Mishiro Yamane did the music for Symphony of the Night. She also did the music for Rondo of Blood. How did her composition stack up?
Well, it's really great background music, because there's always a delicate balance in background music between being good and then taking your attention away from the game. This is great music that kind of blends into the background, but it's also still pleasant to listen to. It's not too repetitive, it has a lot going on with it, but it doesn't actually detract from your attention to what's going on the screen.
I think that one of the best things about the music is how well it fits the title. Not all Castlevania music is symphonic. If you were to look at its musical influences, it's not this kind of classical, scary music. Most of Castlevania's music comes from this progressive rock, sort of glam metal. But the Symphony of the Night soundtrack is very, very different. It is really symphonic. It is based on classical music. Even from the very first level, we get this organ and strings, which I think was synthesized at the time. Imagine if they made this game today with a full orchestral soundtrack.
Oh, yeah.
Would have been incredible.
Yeah.
So, music does fit really well. I think that's pretty unimpeachable.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about something that's not unimpeachable. What did you think of the voice acting when you played the game?
The voice acting for the game, I mean, this was an era when games as art wasn't really something that had taken on yet. Mm-hmm. So most of the time, the people that did the voices were, people who worked on the game itself. The idea of hiring someone just to do the voice for a game was pretty unheard of. Mm-hmm. Having said that, they're not the worst voice acting I've ever heard, but at times it is pretty laughable.
Well, you'll be glad to know that I know you played the original version you can download on the PlayStation Network. I played an updated version for the PSP, part of Dracula X Chronicles. The game is relatively untouched, but they did add a redone script and redone voice acting. The voice acting this time around is pretty good. It's not great, it's not something you would find in, let's say, Dragon Age or Mass Effect, but it sounds good. The characters are believable. They have dialogue that flows pretty well. And Yuri Lowenthal, of every video game ever made, plays Alucard, and he does a very good job. So voice acting is really going to depend on which version of the game you have, but it ranges from, laughable to not so bad.
And you can really forgive the voice acting, because even though the translation isn't 100%, it's not, like, comically bad.
No.
It's very passable in terms of translation.
Oh, there is one oddity that I know we discussed before. We were talking about how in the original translation, Dracula quotes the Bible. Mm-hmm. In the revised version, he does not do that. Do you think that added to the game, detracted from it?
I think it added to the gothic element of the theme, how that the main character, quoted the Bible, because especially if the game is meant to reflect the era it was made in, the Bible had a very big part in everyday life back then. I think I understand the reason why they took it out, because religion has become kind of a taboo subject, especially in video games. The games like Dante's Inferno notwithstanding, not a lot of people want to open up the can of worms that a lot of people have with dealing with religious subjects. So I can understand why they took it out. But it was a nice touch. It was something, it was a little unexpected, and I think it added a little bit more, if not depth, then flavor to the character of Dracula.
For what it's worth, I actually do like the retranslation. They took out the biblical reference, but they kept in that moral ambiguity. Instead of quoting the Bible, he just talks directly about, you think I'm this power-hungry tyrant, but you're not getting the full story. If that's what you think, I won't take it away from you. It's sort of a... It's an ambiguous note to end the game on. It's not really a triumphant scene like you would get from Richter or Simon Belmont or someone like that defeating Dracula. It's sort of subdued.
Because it's always going to be that. It's always going to be like a half victory, considering the guy's killing his father.
Not to mention the fact he's always going to come back.
Oh, yeah.
So...
That kind of mutes your victory a little bit.
Very, very briefly, let us talk about the level design.
The level design is excellent because you sweep from enchanted gardens to dark libraries to caverns to this mechanical clockwork places. You know, there's just such great variety that there's never like a dull or uninteresting level.
And just to add to that, I would say that thanks to a combination of great backgrounds, great textures, and really great music to go along with it, each level is individualized. Each level looks, sounds, and feels different. They're all a lot of fun to play, and they're all pretty difficult. Even if you've leveled up, you've got to conquer some pretty extreme platforming challenges.
Oh, yeah.
So, overall, I think we can agree the game looks great, sounds great. Anything special you wanted to say about the artistry?
I like how the weapons and armor sprites change, because there's a lot of games in the past where like, you have equipped the ultimate sword of destiny, and it looks like the same attack animation as you did when you had the little play wooden sword. So I think this is where we start seeing that character customization element that now is so prominent in games.
One of my favorite parts are the particle effects. You get some really, really great particle effects during the bosses, some really great particle effects during the magic spells. It helps tie the whole experience together. Those are our thoughts on the artistry. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to give you our overall thoughts on Castlevania Symphony of the Night.